So I've popped a question up there on Slido. So feel free to, you can go onto hashtag WIR, or you can take a photo of the digital thing there. And maybe Joy, you and Leanne could do it as well, if you can cope with the technical complexity.
Hang on, what, I was just zoning out there, Sharon. Sorry, what was that?
So I've put a little question on the Slido that we just ask people to think about, right. And then Lucinda will share the findings of it later. So you can either take a photo with your camera of the code.
Oh, right.
Or you can go to slido.com hashtag WIR.
Oh, right. Okay.
I think I won't try to do too many things at once.
Don't, Leanne, maybe just stick with being able to share the slides. That'll do.
Yeah. We can tell you what we think, Sharon. I can send you an email. Don't give us one more thing to do.
Yeah, no, just don't worry, don't stress. It's not a problem. All right, so we've still got lots of people coming on, and for people coming on, I've put, as per usual, I've put the question up on the slide. So just give you a little chance to reflect on how many streams you have. Oh, and I forgot to put the definition of a research stream, but I guess it's a coherent body of work, coherent body of papers, grants, activities that all coalesce nicely together and synthesize. Thank you so much, Eleanor, for putting the QR code there. So welcome everybody. It's literally just gone 11 o'clock, so I will just start very slowly. As you can see, we have a question up there on the board. I forgot to actually define what I mean by a research stream, but what I mean by a research stream is a sort of coherent body of work. So a topic that you may have some papers on, you might be trying to get a grant around, you might have grants on, but it sort of might be the thing you're known for, but it's a sort of coherent body of work. It might be even that you're planning it. So if you're an early career person, you might not have it yet, but you've got it planned. How many of those do you have is the first question I want you to think about. None, like you just got a million different things happening. Have you got one nice cohesive stream? Have you got two? Have you got three? Have you got four? Have you got more than four? I'll be very curious to see if there are any with more than four. And then the second question is, actually, you know, that's what you've got. What would you like to have currently? Do you think actually you've got more, you need more, so you're a bit narrow? Do you think you got it about right? Or do you think actually you should be cutting a few streams, so you really should have less than you currently have? So just answer those questions and we'll share, Lucinda will share the findings with you a little bit later. So first of all, I would like to acknowledge that today we are on the land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation here in Perth. And I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and share my gratitude with these peoples for sharing their land. And do feel free to share what land you are on today, or what country even. I know there are some people here internationally. So today we are talking all about building a program of research, why, when and how. And I'm absolutely delighted to have two returning ARC Laureate Fellows, both of who have been on Women in Research in the past. ARC Laureate Fellow Joy DeMusi and Leanne Tilley. So you will hear from them later. So just to remind you, if you're new to this series, we have lots of fabulous resources on our website, including interviews, actually, with Joy and Leanne. You probably can barely remember doing them. It was so long ago, guys. But I interviewed you. We've got podcasts. We've got little videos of interviews with female laureates, as well as all of our past webinars and other resources. So today, everybody knows to mute the microphones. We do love to see you if you feel comfortable sharing your face. If you've got any problems, put the message in chat. I always encourage you to try not to do emails at the same time or whatever else. Ironing is fine. Last time someone shared that they were doing their ironing, and that seems to me, first of all, I hate ironing, so anything that lessens the pain is good. But, you know, these are some of the ways that we all learn to juggle, I guess. Isn't it amazing? We had 514 people register for the session today, and you can see the breakdown. So really quite a broad group of women are joining us today from level A to E. We have some professional staff, we have students, and we have, you know, some who'd rather not say. So fabulous and welcome to you all. If you've got questions or comments, we love to see your comments as well. Please just pop them in the chat because we know that the chat gets retained. So we're really happy to share all the tips and everything that people put on chat as well. So why am I showing some photos of alpacas or llamas, whichever they are? I'm still not quite sure, I have to admit. I just wanted to, you know, this series is all about small wins, and that's the little things that we can do. We've actually just been on a little writing boot camp here in our research centre. And I just wanted to quickly share, it's not on the topic, but just wanted to quickly share a few of the small win tips that came out of people after the writing bootcamp. And I got the idea for a writing bootcamp actually from other female laureates who were taking their teams away for a couple of days. Some were even going for a week, but just to focus exclusively on writing. So first tip is that the point of these writing boot camps, and if you don't do them, you might think about, you know, is there some way you could do them, set some up or something, is that they remind us that it's absolutely critical as researchers to prioritize writing. And it's often can feel like the thing we do, you know, in the 5 minutes between the 15 meetings or whatever, but it's actually absolutely critical. One of the observations of one of the people in the writing group, one of the young people, because she actually measured her word count and she thought that she wouldn't write much in the afternoon when she was fatigued, but she wrote just as much in the afternoon as she wrote in the morning sessions when she wasn't fatigued. And the message she took from that was, you should, if you've planned to write, you should write irrespective of your mood. And I think this is a tip about not waiting until you're in the mood, because you know, it's like me waiting to be in the mood to diet. It just never happens. Write with others present. We all talked about the social facilitation effect and how if you're actually sitting next to someone who's studiously writing away, it actually can be very motivating and you don't feel like quitting because other people around you are writing. So even if you can't go on a writing boot camp, you might think about just having a little morning of writing. So here there is a session just on Friday mornings where anyone can go to a room with other people and just write. And then the last tip was when we do the writing bootcamp, we really structure it. So you write for a chunk of time, an hour or an hour and a half, depending on whether it's morning or afternoon, and then you stop. And that stopping is really important because I think it's tempting if you're going well to keep going, but actually stop, rest, but then you're still excited to get back to it. And then you start again. So structure your writing time, I think, is really important. And the significance of the llamas / alpacas is that where we went was on a farm, and there were these very cute little alpacas, and we had a competition of memes of what they might be thinking about all these weird academics turning up to write. Okay, so today, back to the topic, we're going to talk about building a program of research. So the first thing is thinking a little bit about why. Why is it important to build a program of research? And what I mean by program, as I said before, or stream, is a coherent body of work where you've got some focus. So if this was a garden, you know, you'd have not a million different flowers of all different types. You'd have a cluster of similar sorts of flowers. The first thing to say is, of course, this issue of programs and streams and how many you have and how well established they are is going to depend a bit on discipline. because I think different disciplines might handle this topic differently. So it's great that we've got Joy and Leanne today, who are from completely different disciplines. Career stage makes a real difference. And of course, also your personality makes a difference too, what you like and what matters to you. Some of the advantages of having a strong program or focus are, of course, around building reputation and esteem. So you would know that if you've managed to create focus and esteem, and I've seen people do this quite early in their careers, they start to get a reputation, they start getting invited to symposium to present on that topic, they start to maybe get grants on that topic. So having focus really helps with that side of the academic equation. Of course, we all have to go for promotions and grants at some times, and if you've got focus, you will have to say in your promotion application and in your grants how your work comes together and addresses important issues, and focus can really help with that narrative, that story that you have. I think another advantage of focus is it can help you decide what to say no to. If you have a problem with saying no, like I'm sure many of us, it can really help if you're saying, no, this is my focus, and tempting though it is to collaborate with famous person X who just asked me, I might focus and say no. There is actually some evidence. I'm not going to talk about a lot of research as I normally do today, guys, because I didn't find too much on this topic, but I did find one study, a relatively small study, but it did show in this study that the more that people had a strategic focus in their research, then the more that positively influenced the number of publications and the quality of publications. And that was partly just directly, I think, because if you're focused, maybe you're more successful with your publishing, but also indirectly because it meant that people were more likely to get research grants and so on. So there is some evidence that having focus or a stream or a couple of streams really helps. So just if there's any other advantages you can think of that I've missed to having focus, just pop them in the chat. And if you've come on late, we have a question on Slido, which is #WIR, which is asking you how many research streams or focus areas you have in your research. If you're feeling like scattered and you really don't know what the hell is your focus, a couple of things. I think goal setting theory is really important here. Goal setting is all about setting goals and then putting in place steps to meet those goals, and then having some form of accountability, whether that's your peers or your mentor or your supervisor or your boss or someone. But that is, and I'm sure that Joy and Leanne will pick up on some of those ideas. If you're trying to go for promotion and you haven't had that focus and you're going, help, how do I make what I do sound coherent? I just want to share this little excerpt that I found from Anne Wilhasing's blog, and the website is there. And just to remind you, she has a lot of resources on her website. She talks about, and she gives some examples of people creating their career narrative retrospectively. So they didn't design it this way, but when you look back, what are the threads of focus that you can ascertain? So if I just read a little bit, this person said, when I crafted my promotion application, I really struggled to tie together 5 different research programs, which doesn't surprise me because 5 is a lot. However, after some reflection, I was able to capture the principles underlying them, and I was able to write up the rest of the application evidencing these principles. My approach to research has been guided by 3 principles: conducting innovative research in new areas, designing rigorous tests, etc., and challenging commonly held beliefs. It doesn't matter what they are. The point is, I think what I'm saying is, if you're listening to us talking about the value of focus and you're going, help, I've got too many streams, or I'm too scattered, and I want to go for promotion, you can still find ways to build that narrative. So let's go to the other side of the coin, though, because this also happens, which is when people feel that they're too focused and they want a few more different flowers in their garden. And I think this probably particularly happens with people as they progress in their career. Maybe you start in a particular stream and that's what you do your PhD on and you get success in it, but then you sort of get bored with it, or you never were that interested in the first place and it's just what you happen to stumble upon, you know. So there comes times when you say, I need to broaden my focus. Because of course, one downside of being very focused can be boredom. Another downside can be that you're stuck with a topic that is not or no longer is your passion, or that's not interesting to other people. You know, it might be that you thought it was an amazing thing to do, but just hasn't got any traction from other people. It might be that you feel like you're having to say no to really interesting, cool things and you're just missing great opportunities. You might just feel you're getting stale and, you know, you just feel like you're saying the same old stuff over and over again. So you've gone down a rabbit hole, but you're sort of feeling a bit stuck in that rabbit hole. So what do you do then? So I'd like to introduce you to this book that I think is great called Working Identity by Herminia Ibarra. And she's a professor from, I should know, but I've temporarily forgotten. Anyway, she's a professor. So this is all research based. So she talks about this idea of provisional selves. So what Herminia talks about is our traditional model of careers is let's figure out the thing you're most interested in, passionate about, and do it. And, you know, you do all these career interest inventories and personality measures, and let's figure out what's really good for you. And then that's what you do in your career. And sometimes we have that same sort of mindset around research. Find what you're passionate about and do it. And that's your topic. The reality is, though, that that doesn't work for everyone. And there are other ways. And so Herminia talks about how in careers, we're actually lots of possible people. We might have jumped down the rabbit hole, like in my case of work design, and that's what I'm known for and that's what I'm focused on. But I could have jumped down a different rabbit hole, which could have still been very engaging and interesting and exciting to me. So there's lots of possible people that we can be. And we've gone down one rabbit hole and become one sort of researcher, but we can be different people. And so she has this idea of provisional selves, which is try something out, try a different type of you and just experiment. And what she talks about is we sometimes get stuck in our own head a bit too much. And we're thinking like, what's my passion? What's my passion? I don't know. I'm thinking, I'm reflecting. And her answer is just try something, you know, write a paper on topic X and see how you like it, or go to a conference in a different area and see if you get excited, but try things out and do small experiments and see how you feel. Observe. How did I like that? Did I find it interesting, or did I think it was interesting? Actually, not pretty interesting. And talk with other people and learn. So I think if you're one of the people who's stuck down a rabbit hole and wants to broaden out, you might think about this idea of possible selves. You might even want to read that book and just try out different models. And I apply this to career things. So for example, there was this time, which I may have shared on this before, I can't remember, where I wanted to go on board, right? And I thought maybe this was a direction for my future. And I went on the local school board and I hated it because I was completely out of control. Like there's the boss, which is the principal, and then there's the people on the board. And we spent our whole time just trying to influence him to do things. And I discovered how frustrating that was. So my little experiment led me to conclude maybe boards were not for me. And so, you know, I tried some other little experiment. But so think like that about your research. If you're really not loving your topic or feeling a bit stuck, try some ideas. And beware this competency trap. And what we mean by the competency trap is sometimes we get trapped in the things we're good at. Okay, so we're really great at quantitative research, and so that's what we do, and we build on that. But you're desperate to do something else. But everybody thinks of you as a quantitative researcher and all your opportunities, and that's where you feel comfortable and safe. And it's scary to try qualitative research, for example. So the competency trap is sometimes we're really good at things, but that means we sort of then feel a bit scared to step out of those things. And that can happen in our research streams. We're really known for them, we're really good at them, and then it feels a bit scary to step out of them. So in that case, you might think about a bit of a dual strategy where you try to keep one stream going, but build a new stream with some pilot studies or some master's students or a review or something relatively small you might start out with. Okay, so I've talked about how we can have too many flowers in our gardens and we need to try and focus, and using goal setting and things like that to help focus. But I've also talked about how sometimes you reach a point, and it probably happens more later in your career, you reach a point where you're sort of bored with your flowers and you want more and you want different topics. These ideas of experimenting, trying small steps to try is something to think about. Right, now I want to talk a little bit about how. We had lots of questions on this topic, and it's a huge topic, and so I'm very grateful that we've got Joy and Leanne to help with this as well. But lots of talks about how do you get a stream going. So, okay, I know what I want to do. I want to have a stream of research on this, but there's just me, and maybe I'm even part-time. Maybe I'm actually working as a postdoc on another project and it's not really my passion. How do you get your program going? And look, I don't think we can cover all of this with one slide, but I'll just give you a couple of ideas, and I know that Joy and Leanne will build on this. But, you know, first you have to figure out that what is it that you want to do. And so you've got to have your question, your areas. Ideally, it is one that energizes you. Ideally, it is one that builds on earlier work. So if you're working as a research fellow for someone else, it's not always possible, but hopefully you can be still in that same broad area, whatever it is that your team is looking at, but you can have a unique angle on it or a spin-off. So that means that probably it means it's going to be easier for you to pursue that direction, because probably your team members and your supervisor will hopefully also be interested in that. That's the ideal world. It's not always possible, but try if you can to build on your earlier work in some way, even if it's a bit like that career retrofitting, where you're saying, okay, it's a different topic, but actually at least the methods are the same. And so, because that's going to give you a head start. Of course, if you're thinking of a new topic, or you've got a topic and you're like, how do I make it a stream? You've got to really understand the research on that area. So you've got to read and you've got to write. And writing a review paper or something like that can be a tremendous way of making your name, getting a program going, because you're not having to collect all the data, but you're still, usually review pieces are actually highly impactful. So it can be a really powerful way of establishing that this is your area and that's one you want to build on. And then, of course, you've got to think about, especially if you're part-time or you're really working as a postdoc on another, how do you build resources? And again, it's about trying to just do small steps, because, yeah, these, you know, Rome can't be built in a day, but could you get a small grant? So most departments have small grants. You know, you might not want to shoot, first of all, for an ARC DECRA. You might want to start with a travel grant from your workplace. So think about a small grant, because that can help you get resources. Could you get an honours student? If you supervise honours students or master's students or PhDs, can you encourage them to work on your topic? And that's normally possible with some thought. Ask for help, of course. Let people know this is the direction you want to go in, and that they may have ways of bringing you on board with their work or something. The other side of it, so you need resources, but you want to start also building up your esteem and your reputation. I think a really good thing to do is to just know who are the key researchers in the area and know what they're doing. Keep up to date with them, follow their work. You may even reach out. They may be too busy to respond, but follow their LinkedIn if they have one, or their Twitter or whatever. Make sure you've signed up to the journals that are really important, so that you automatically get queued when those journals publish on the topic that you're interested in. I always encourage people to organise a symposium at a conference early, because it's a great way, not just of building networks, but of building your reputation for someone doing research in this area so that next time they might reach out and invite you. Collaborate, of course, we've talked about that a lot. You might even do things like, I've noticed people sometimes will take my papers and summarize them and put them on LinkedIn. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Because they've done all the work and they've made it far more interesting. And I take notice of those people and I notice and I look at where they're from and so on. And I see a question there, how do you commence review writing? You absolutely can approach the journal. I can tell you as someone who's done editorial work, we never have enough reviewers. So write to the journal and write to the editor and tell them your experience. Sometimes journals have different processes and they may not automatically add you. But sometimes they're like, thank goodness, yes, brilliant. So do that. The other thing you can do is do shadow reviews with your supervisors or colleagues so that you can get a taste of it and see how it all works. And then when that's going good, like I get asked to do a review probably every 2 days. So if I know that my junior colleagues want to do reviews, I'm like, thank you. So then when you get this horrible box where you have to suggest people for reviews, I put those names forward. So let your senior people know that you want to do reviews. And someone said they got a review through networking. Another good thing to do is offer to review for conferences. So in our field, if you review for the big conferences, it gets you into the mailing lists and stuff. And so again, find those little small ways of starting review, and then do a good job, because that then leads to other, because they rate you, and that leads to them, later inviting you to do more reviews and so on. And then look, my last slide, and then we're going to hear from others, is when. If you're either stuck with too many flowers or you haven't got enough, when do you start changing? And my answer is basically start today, because this is all about small wins. So what is one small thing you could do immediately after this session based on everything that we've already discussed? What's one small thing that you could do? Maybe I'll ask you to think about that, Lucinda, for your own self. And when you ask the questions, you can share. So thank you, guys. That is all from me today. But we are now very privileged to hear from two fabulous people. ARC, first we're going to hear actually from ARC Laureate Fellow Leanne Tilley, who is a professor of biochemistry and pharmacology. Both these guys are from University of Melbourne today, and she was an Australian Research Council Georgina Sweet Fellow. And she does amazing research on things like preventing or treating malaria and things like that. So you're going to get a really terrific science perspective from Leanne. And then next up, we'll have ARC Laureate Fellow Joy DeMusi, who is a history professor. And she has done some amazing work, and I've had the opportunity to hear Joy speak about some of her fabulous work. And it just, for someone who's a non-historian, it's really made me appreciate the power of history, actually. So you will hear second from an ARC Laureate Fellow in a quite different discipline. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And we are hopefully going to smoothly transition across to Leanne, who I believe has a couple of slides to share. And Leanne, you're still on mute, just so you know.
Okay, so can everybody hear me?
We can hear you, and we can see some amazing looking slides. Thank you.
Brilliant. So thanks very much, Sharon. Yeah, no, that was excellent. Such amazing words of wisdom there. I'm really hopeful that, everybody will be terribly excited after all that. I certainly am. So I'm not going to talk for too long, and I'll probably cover some of the same areas that Sharon has talked about, but I'll do it from an individual perspective, and hopefully that will bring in some new things that people can start to think about. As Sharon said, I'm at the University of Melbourne. And I am an old lady with white hair, but I wasn't always. I once was an early career researcher. And at the risk of totally embarrassing myself, here's some photos of me when I was a young postdoc, and then doing early sabbaticals in Europe and in the US, swanning around, just thinking about, like the next experiment, possibly the next job, but certainly not really thinking about my whole career or what my research program was going to be. But somehow or other, I did get to be the Redmond Barry Distinguished Professor, Emeritus Biochemistry and Pharmacology, and as Sharon said, an Australian Laureate Fellow. So obviously somewhere along the line, I actually got my head into gear and started actually thinking about what I needed to do to set up a research program. So I'm really just going to go through a few little kind of statements, anecdotes that will just give you a bit of an idea of some of the things that I learned along the way. Okay, so I think the most important thing that sort of looking back is that I had a vision. Okay, so very early on, as we said, the vision develops. You get your narrative in kind of retrospect, but I always knew that I wanted to work on malaria and that I wanted to try to help develop new anti-malarial drugs. But I had specific ideas about what I wanted to do. And so in particular, I'm very interested in different kinds of microscopies. Microscopy was my thing. So then I was applying these high-end microscopies to malaria parasites, which really nobody very much else was doing at the time. And as well as that, I could see once I'd sort of done quite a lot of microscopy that I really needed to get some molecular structural information. So I worked with colleagues to set up to do some structural biology experiments. And I'm not going to go through the details, but you get the idea from the pretty pictures. And as well as that, I had a lot of colleagues who are working in omics type areas, and so I had access to these technologies. I thought, okay, that's not my expertise, but I need that, so I'll add that to the the armory. And then I thought, okay, well, I really need to do, I'm in a position with having collected all of this data to do some mathematical modeling. Again, not my expertise, but I could hook up with colleagues who could help us with that mathematical modeling. And the idea was to then use that to make predictions, which we could test then, because we're pretty good molecular cell biologists and protein chemists. And so the idea was to go round and around this kind of virtuous cycle till eventually we'd get to the point where we would have enough information to design new antimalarial drugs. And really, this is the part that I've kind of been concentrating on in the last several years of my career. But really sort of, I was always had this kind of vision of trying to use this kind of high-end technologies to lead to this outcome of better antimalarials. Okay, so what are some of the things that I think I did right? So one of them was being prepared to move institutions. So I started off at Melbourne, went to Sydney, went to the Netherlands, went to France, back to Melbourne, over to La Trobe, back to Melbourne, and then a couple of sabbaticals en route. So that meant that I met lots of people from different areas, and then I could actually bring that expertise back to Australia. When I wanted to set up a research program, I was in a position to say, okay, here's something that nobody's really doing in Australia, so I'm in a position to actually set my research program up and differentiate myself from other people by bringing those ideas back. So the other thing that I feel as I did right was to reach out across discipline boundaries. So here you can see a picture of me when I was Deputy Director and then Director of the ARC Centre of Excellence for Coherent X-ray Science. Now, this was totally outside my normal expertise and certainly totally outside my comfort zone. And you can get a bit of an idea. There's a bunch of really hardcore physicists, but nonetheless, I sort of threw myself into this, and I really advise everybody to take every opportunity that's presented to you, even or especially if it takes you outside your comfort zone, because that's where you really get to do something quite interesting. So the other thing I would suggest is that, yeah, you find a technique or system or niche, whatever, to call your own. In my case, it was microscopy. And we developed quite a lot of high-end microscopies and actually set up some pretty high-end microscope facilities. So that was good, because basically once I'd managed to get the LEAF grants and set up those microscopy facilities, I could then offer to share that with colleagues. People would come to work with me and want to work with me because of the particular expertise that we had. So that was a way of actually sort of building a research program and getting people to collaborate with you who had different sets of expertise. Sharon touched on this, but you really need to network widely and wisely. So you need to attend and organise conferences. So here's a photo of me with the Lawn Protein Conference. I joined that very early in the piece. And again, this is a bunch of very scary protein chemists. I did eventually get to be program chair and vice president. They were, as I said, extremely scary. And you can see I never really did get the dress sense. This is a conference that took place down in Lawn, but I learned a hell of a lot from that experience and had the opportunity to interact with a lot of people from overseas who I could then form interactions with. But take home is here, you really need to be always asking questions in forums with colleagues. Your voice has to be heard. You have to make sure that your ideas are articulated. So as Sharon said, nobody can help you if they don't actually know you need help. And it really is important that you put your hand up, ask a question, make sure that people know you're actually there. In terms of the topic, I think it's really important if you can try to choose a topic that makes a difference. You have to ask the hard questions of yourself when you're trying to articulate that proposal. You know, why this, why you, why now? And if you don't have very good answers to those questions, then think again, because the reviewers are probably not going to be impressed if you can't really explain, whether the work would lead to translate to real world outcomes. If the work isn't done, who's going to notice, who's going to care? If there's not a good answer to that, then it's time to think about doing something or other else. And then, dream large, but make sure you can explain how the current proposal makes the best use of resources, labs, facilities, etc., and why the scale is right. So it has to be ambitious but achievable. So really important to think about what your topic is going to be and how it makes a difference. The next thing I'd suggest is that, you really have to make the most of your successes. Okay, so basically when you get that big discovery, when you get that big paper, when you get your first grant, that's the time when you have to go to, the people who are making these decisions and say, okay, now I want my own independent research program. So strike while the iron is hot. Don't sit back and just enjoy your success. Actually build on that to try to make sure that you get what you need when you have the opportunity. Don't wait till you're feeling really miserable and then, oh, okay, why isn't anybody giving me a research program? Do it when you're on and up. So that's basically it. This is the last slide. I just wanted to say that, yes, it's very important to realise that everybody suffers from imposter syndrome, including me and probably Joy as well, and Sharon. You have times when it's tough, right? When you think, I don't know how I got here. I don't know how long I can keep this up before somebody realises that I'm not really very good. So how do you get through those tough times? Well, it's about the passion. You do need to have passion for what you're doing. There has to be some kind of inner drive, that kind of devil on your back that keeps you going, even when times are really tough. And there's no question that there is hard work involved. But if you have your vision and you're really focused on your vision, then that makes it all worthwhile and you can actually keep going. So I leave you with this comment from Alan Johnson Sirleaf, who was the president of Liberia, got the Nobel Prize for empowering women. Back in 2011, she says, if your dreams do not scare you, they are not big enough. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Leanne. I think there's many pearls of wisdom in what you've just said. And I particularly want to highlight the comment, make the most of your success, because I do think that women sometimes are not very good at that, so it's that imposter thing probably. So and let people know of what you're doing that's good. I just think sometimes we're not out there enough. And it's not, I'm not blaming women, because there are lots of forces against women being noticed that are not to do with them as individuals. But I think that's great. And I love that if your dreams do not scare you, they're not big enough. I'm going to remember that one. Thank you. Thank you so much, Leanne. So we'll have a chance to ask Leanne questions a bit later. But let's go now to Joy and hear a humanities perspective on research programs.
Thanks, Sharon.
So, over to you, Joy.
Thanks, Sharon, and thanks, Leanne. Always a pleasure to hear Leanne. We often appear as a bit of a tag on these things, so great always to hear Leanne and to see her slides. I have no slides. I'm too vain. I won't take a photo. I'm too self-consciously, resistant to myself on screen. So I've just got some points, really largely building on Sharon and Leanne. you know, and their contribution. So let me just quickly say, so I'm a historian. My specialisation is 19th and 20th century Australian history. My ARC Laureate that you've heard about continues to be on child refugees. So it's looking at the experience of child refugees, the challenges and opportunities children have faced here when they've come as refugees, both in the past and currently. So that was the broad topic. And I guess if I were to reflect on building the program, in my discipline, like all our disciplines, we are forced to specialise quite early, right? So early up, your PhD is very specialised. That's your major contribution. That's your specific contribution. So we all begin that building process, whether you know it or not, or whether you're conscious of it or not, from the get-go. So, you know, my PhD related to this, funnily enough, my PhD was almost 40 years ago now, can you believe it? And over that time, I've gone on into various different research programs and various different themes, but they're all interconnected and they're all interrelated. And as Sharon pointed out, you know, often you don't see those patterns, or you think, well, that's, you know, that might not be obvious, that connection. But actually, as you progress through your career, typically you'll be looking for new intersections and new dimensions to a problem. So if I had to sum up my career in 30 seconds and my research career, in fact, that is what's kind of reflected in it. Even if at the time when I started in you know, as a 20-something-year-old, I had no idea where it was heading. I wanted to do a PhD. I was passionate about the topic. It was about women in politics in the early 20th century. And that took me off into a whole range of directions. And here we are. And in a way, the current project I'm working on, it still reflects some of those interests. So it's not like, you know, your research program doesn't build. Now, I just want to emphasize the word build in what we're talking about today. We're looking at the research program, but the building is really interesting. Everyone will build it differently. But the thing is, you always, I mean, my experience, the questions you ask are always leading to other questions. They're always leading to other questions. So let yourself ask those questions and continue that journey. And that's the way I would frame it, actually. People get very self-conscious about this sort of thing. But actually, if you have that inquiring mind, and obviously you all do, you know, let yourself ask and build on your previous kind of work. So that's how I would kind of reflect on it. And so when we ask why, Sharon pointed out, I mean, obviously you want to build your career as a researcher, and the program that you develop and the research you do will define your identity as a researcher, and how you position yourself in research in your discipline. No one has a research program born with them, so you do have to develop it. But as I say, often that spirals out from your PhD and so on. So that's the kind of broad thing I'd say, just that building and building blocks and thinking of it as a building block process. The second thing I'd say just on the why is around, and Leanne mentioned this, for me it's about problem solving. Now, you know, I have problems I want to solve about the past and how they relate to the present in a nutshell. And my laureate, again, was about how do we look at children and child refugees in this country, their prospects, their development, and the limitations we've imposed on them. What ways can we move forward? I mean, this is condensing a lot of work, obviously, but it's the problem that drove me to put that laureate in. Now, if I didn't get the laureate, I would have still done the research, obviously. That was what my passion was. So problem solving and making a difference is the why for me, as it always has been in research. That's condensed really in a nutshell why I'm a researcher and what drives me to try and make a difference to my scholarship, to my community, my profession, but also to the wider world. And with a topic like migration, displacement, and refugees, you know, it's obviously very relevant. So the impact of your scholarship and the unique contribution you can make, I think they're the sorts of things that really frame the why in my case. One thing I'll add to what Sharon and Leanne was saying, the other why for me, and even as a young ECR mid-career, mentoring and building the careers of others. Now, you know, when you're an ECA, you're trying to build your own career, but I have always been a very busy PhD supervisor, and even when I was an ECR mid-career researcher, I was, supervising a lot of PhDs, for instance. And I think mentoring and building the careers of others is really important, even if you yourself are still trying to build your own through your honours students or other connections and networks. And that to me too became a natural segue into the Laureate when I became the Kathleen Fitzpatrick fellow and ran a mentoring program, and Leanne was the Georgina Sweet one as well. And so both of us have come to that mentoring aspect of our careers. So that's really important to me when I think of the why. And I think any program of research, as you move through your career, I think should have that embedded in it. That I think we should support our colleagues and others moving through postdocs, PhDs, and so on. So I had quite a largish team for my Laureate, and I'm very happy to say that all those who were part of my Laureate team have now got jobs and they've got tenure and now they're building their careers. So, as a researcher for me, and especially for women, and, Sharon and I have long chats about this, but we know there are still issues around gender in research and gender in the university. So I saw my contribution very much around that as well. And I've done some research on that too. But mentoring is also another why for me. On the when, I think both Leanne and Sharon have pointed out, and I agree, it's now, it's yesterday, it's in half an hour, it's in 2 hours, get on with it, don't wait. I think that's one thing we all learn is time will go very rapidly and very quickly, and the sooner you can start strategizing around what you want to do, what problems you want to solve, where your research is going, how you conceive of the component parts of your program, the better it will be in terms of the program, in terms of, your confidence, I suppose, and building up the research. So definitely don't wait. And Sharon, I like, all those small gains. It doesn't have to be a massive Laureate you get tomorrow. It's all, and the Laureate doesn't come overnight, literally. You've got to build up to it. So all those publications and grants that you get along the way, the little ones, the large ones, it's all kind of building up to a research contribution. And so definitely the when is about, as soon as possible. I guess the other thing I'll just reflect on here is, so my research, I can say I build a sustained program and a largish one when I'm ready intellectually to join the dots. So Leanne talked about interdisciplinarity. So a lot of my research programs are interdisciplinary. And once, it's at a stage where you can bring together the dots, that's when we could define a program, if you like. I mean, up until then, it's probably, areas of activity or, an article here or an article there, but joining the dots, and I say that in terms of a broader kind of coming together of various problems. So for my Laureate, just to give you that example again, I was working a lot on women and war and children, the two world wars in particular, and the impact on children and child refugees, on migration and displacement. And these were three bodies of work that I'd been working on. They're interrelated, but they're separate. And then I brought them together in the program of the Laureate on child refugees. And it made a lot of sense. There was a logic to it. It was an easy coming together. But, I hadn't planned that. It was really the sort of next level up, escalating up to the research, I suppose I'd put it that way. So joining the dots, when you're ready to kind of really bring together, that can be a program in itself. I guess one thing we've sort of touched on a little bit, but the second part of the when there for me is, and it's hugely important, is to always allow for unexpected discoveries, unexpected questions, unexpected perspectives that come up. So when people shape a program, for me anyway, I've always felt it was never watertight. There'll always be something that'll slip in that'll be really, really interesting. You've got to be open to that. And I've seen my colleagues, for example, researchers who just sort of are too set on a program, and then that's their tunnel vision, and that's what they do. I've never done that myself. It's always been like, okay, this is where my program's going, or this is where my research area is going. But oh my goodness, isn't that interesting, that little development over here? And I wonder how I can. So always allowing and being open to new questions that you're not expecting. And I always sometimes find that is the most exciting. And I'll just give you a really quick example. I'm working with some ocean engineers at Melbourne about refugee boats on the oceans and the experience of those refugee boats on the various oceans. And we've just published a wonderful article, I think, collaborative article, and just about to finish another one. And working with ocean engineers, I would never in my wildest dreams have ever thought I would be in that position. But I got very interested in the ocean and how refugees managed that flight. And we, as historians, didn't have access to that material. But this wonderful team of ocean engineers can access that and tell me, and it comes back to climate change and how the waves are getting higher in the various parts of various oceans that refugees flee on. Anyway, I won't go into that.
Joy, thank you. I'm going to stop you there,
okay.
Sorry, because I know you haven't got to the how, but
I think just 1 minute on the how.
Just okay, quickly. 1 minute on the how. Go for it.
Okay, 1 minute on the how, just to add to everybody else, was managing setbacks. Now, Leanne mentioned that, but I think we can talk about that. Sorry, Sharon. I was about to wind up, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. So, well, look, let's go to Lucinda now for some questions. Thank you, Joy. Insightful as ever, because I know there are going to be questions on how. That's why I'm going to interrupt you there. So over to you, Lucinda. And I'm just noticing in the chat, just while Lucinda gets set, some of the challenges of trying to do these on short-term contracts might be something we want to pick up on. But Lucinda, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I just love hearing all of the different backgrounds and research streams that people work on. So we'll go through the quick questions that we had, and then we'll pick up on some of the questions from the chat. So our first one, how many streams do you currently have in your research? Most people have 3, which is, I think, more than I had anticipated. But I'm curious, Joy and Leanne, how many would you classify your streams as? Would it be around 3 as well, or more or less? Oh, Leanne, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, just saying that, yes, I had one sort of focus point, which was to solve malaria. So that's the one thing you want to do. But then, yes, how you do that, yes, some of it was about, building new microscopies. Some of it is about sort of setting up new technologies. There'd be different grants that you'd be applying for in different areas. So I think it's fine to have various strands, as Joy said, so long as they're all heading in the same direction.
You can pull it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Leanne. I mean, I think I've got about that many, or maybe a bit more, a few more, but there's a core.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And we asked whether people would like more or less, about the same, and it seems like most people are fairly happy, or 47% are fairly happy with what they've got, which is really nice. So it sounds like people maybe just continue on their current trajectory and keep building. I think, Leanne, you might have said looking at building in your comments, and I think that sounds like where most people need to focus their energy.
Yeah. Interestingly, not many people think they have too many streams. So that's interesting. Okay, over to some questions, Lucinda.
I'm going to stop sharing. I think the most common question that we had, which came through in the pre-submitted ones as well, was around navigating postdoc positions and precarious employment situations, and how you can build that longer term focus. Do you have any advice or thoughts on that?
So yeah, I've sort of used my own postdoc years, I guess, as a way of building the techniques that I would take into my research program. I guess I was in a fairly lucky situation where I was able to choose labs where they let me kind of have some latitude in terms of what I wanted to work on. and then basically picking up different bits from different labs that I worked in. Then when I actually brought it back together, but it was when I got it was before I got my first position. I wasn't tenured, but I did actually have at least 3 years the first time I actually set up a research program. And then, but it was basically bringing together the bits that I'd already sort of managed to garner from various postdoc experiences.
Mm.
I think I'll
Anyway,
just jump in. Yeah, look, just quickly. I mean, in history, in the humanities, we don't have labs, so there's a lot more flexibility, I think, in terms of building your own research profile if you're on short-term contracts. I think, I mean, I'll just throw in here some tips around being absolutely ruthless with your time and juggling a whole lot of other demands, because I think that's where you can try and multitask. And I think in a way, we are talking about multitasking when you're looking at short-term contracts in any context. People are trying to do their work for what they're paid for, but then getting on with their own research. So juggling that multitasking is a challenge, I think.
And if I can just answer, I saw a specific question on this issue with precarious employment around PhD supervision. And it is a real problem because, like at Curtin, you're not allowed to supervise as a sole or main lead supervisor if you've got less than 3 years. And who has less than 3 years, who has more than 3 years when you're on a postdoc? It's very rare. So I think the only model, certainly I love if people got other ideas, the only model I really know is to co-supervise with someone who is more tenured or got longer term contract and then negotiate, having quite a lead role. It might be that you formally are not allowed to be the boss supervisor, if you know what I mean, but informally you can still be the main supervisor as a postdoc, because I know this because I do this with some of my postdocs. They help supervise my students. They really play a lead role. They can't claim that, unfortunately, but I think it really helps them with their learning how to be a supervisor and so on. The other thing I'd say is, somebody was saying, what if you're moving universities a lot? What happens? I would say be a good supervisor, because actually when people, if you move universities and you've got a student and they think you're wonderful, they're still going to want to keep working with you even if you're in another institution. And it might be that you're not formally supervising them. You might not be allowed to. I mean, you could explore if you are, but you still will end up collaborating and working with them. So I've moved institutions a lot, like Leanne, and my PhD students always seem to come with me, if not formally, informally, because we want to keep working together and we find the way to do that. So it's not easy when you're on these short-term contracts, and we manage 30 or so people on these contracts. We know what it's like, but it is possible sometimes to find ways. So back to you, Lucinda. I did just want to tackle the supervision issue particularly because it's important.
Yeah. Another piece that I was thinking about, and we had some questions around, is juggling going after the money and where you know that there is going to be funding versus going after what you really believe in and your real interest and passion. And I wonder if you've had experience in managing that conflict and that discrepancy, and what you did to manage that. Leanne?
Yeah,
well,
I can.
Leanne, go for it.
I can go first. So yes, it is interesting. Reality is that, yes, you need the money to be able to do anything. It's also a reality that often by the time you actually get the grant to do something, you've actually already done most of it. It just hasn't been published yet because it takes so long to actually get the grant that you've already done it, and you actually then use the funds, and don't tell the ARC I said that, but to actually do what the next project is that you've already got very excited about. But yes, most important thing is to get the funds, and it's a question of making it so that you do actually want to do work in the area that is actually being supported. You can somehow or other make your work intersect with that area so that you're not lying. You're just saying, okay, no, I really, really want to do this, and just build your narrative so that it both meets the criteria and still allows you the freedom to do what you really want to do.
I would just echo that, that in some senses, you know, often you do have to get funding in some way, shape or form, but there's also often more latitude within the funding to craft it to fit your interests than what there might appear to be. And also, I would say the other thing is, having got lots of funding over the years, you know, sometimes it actually pushes you in interesting directions, actually. You know, that it's a bit like, you know, you guys were talking before, Leanne, about those opportunities that, you know, take every opportunity. Sometimes the grants are an opportunity to go into an area that's a bit different. And actually, some of my more exciting research is almost that I've been forced to do because that's what I was funded to do. But then it generates interest. So I think there can be advantages, but of course there are risks too. Lucinda, do you want to ask Joy another quick question? Can we squeeze in one more?
Yes, I think one thing that I was thinking when you were all talking was you covered the what, how, and when. I think another thing that came up for me was the who, and it kind of came up throughout all of your conversations. Is there anyone in your career so far that were particularly important people in helping you navigate these decisions around jumping around or holding steady?
Definitely, Lucinda. I mean, one of the messages, strong messages I have for everyone is you need strong mentors. I've had been fortunate enough to have very strong mentors throughout my whole career. In the early stages, I had some really amazing mentors, and they were great advisors and, you know, just a sounding board for progress and how I was going. But yeah, in a nutshell, I'd say definitely, no question.
Well, I'm super sorry, but we are at 11:59. As usual, we always run out of time. But look, I'm seeing, based especially on some of these questions, that thinking a little bit about challenges when you're on temporary short-term contracts, which is, of course, as we know, incredibly common, might be a topic for the future to pick up. But look, at this point, I just want to say, I know everyone's going to start jumping off. We had more than 228 people on the call at its peak. So thank you so much to Leanne and Joy and Lucinda for your fabulous insights and questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It is always so wonderful to see the chat and the questions and the networking going on in the background and the foreground. I look forward to seeing you. I can't remember what our next topic is, but look forward to all seeing you soon. So thank you all very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. That was terrific, guys. I'll email you shortly.
Okay, bye.